Emily Thompson, 8 years old, struggling financially with her grandmother, plays on an old abandoned piano to collect a few coins. Her clothes are modest, her shoes worn, but when she begins playing Chopin with a perfection impossible for her age, the crowd stands speechless. Suddenly appears among the spectators James Crawford, the most powerful music producer in Britain, returning from a failed meeting. When he hears these perfect notes coming from the small fingers of a girl who looks like a forgotten prodigy, the world stops. "Impossible," he whispers, recognizing a talent he's been searching for years. But what James doesn't know is that Emily is the daughter of the famous pianist, David Thompson, who died in an accident when she was 5, leaving her with a grandmother in financial difficulty. The truth that will emerge will change both their lives forever. London, Covent Garden. The September sun kissed the cobblestones of this iconic square in the heart of the capital, while tourists and Londoners mingled in the daily dance of urban life. In the center of this urban theater, near the Royal Opera House, an abandoned piano had been waiting for days for someone to restore its voice. Emily Thompson, 8 years old, gazed at the instrument with eyes wide as stars. Her little pink jumper was slightly too big, her jeans had colorful patches on the knees, and her white trainers were already gray with dust. Yet despite these modest clothes, there was something special about this little girl. A natural posture, a grace in her movements that spoke of a refined education, now lost. Beside her, Grandmother Rose clutched a worn fabric bag. At 73 years old, this former primary school teacher had sacrificed everything to raise her granddaughter after the tragedy that had struck the family. The pension of $800 per month barely covered the rent for their bedsit in Tower Hamlets, and the bills to pay were becoming increasingly heavy. 3 years earlier, her father, David Thompson, had been Britain's most celebrated pianist, graduate of the Royal Academy of Music, with an international career that had led them to live in a beautiful flat in Kensington. Emily had begun playing at 4 and immediately shown a talent that amazed even her father. Then came the car accident. David was returning from a concert in Manchester when a lorry crossed his path. In one night, Emily had lost everything: Daddy, the elegant flat, the private piano lessons, the designer little dresses. Only Grandmother Rose remained, who had taken her in without hesitation, but with limited means. For 3 years, Emily hadn't touched a piano. Grandmother couldn't afford lessons, and the only instrument they had owned had been sold to pay for the funeral. But music still lived in her small fingers, in memories of hours spent studying with Daddy, in melodies that made her dream at night of better times. Emily sat on the stool too high for her, adjusted her position as Daddy had taught her, and began. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major rose into the London air like a prayer. But what came from her small fingers was something marvelous. It wasn't just technically perfect music, it was pure emotion, transformed into sound. The crowd immediately began to gather. It was impossible to ignore the spectacle of this 8-year-old girl playing like a master, with an interpretive depth that seemed to belong to someone who had lived 100 years of joy and sorrow. James Crawford, 45 years old, was crossing Covent Garden on his phone, discussing heatedly with his assistant. Britain's most powerful music producer had just finished a catastrophic meeting with Scarlett Rose, the pop star of the moment, who had refused to record the album that was meant to cement his legacy. Those notes struck him like lightning. He turned towards the piano, and what he saw left him speechless. An 8-year-old girl playing Chopin with a perfection he had only heard in concerts at the Royal Albert Hall. He approached slowly, the phone forgotten in his hand, while Emily continued playing, ignoring everything else. Every note was perfect. every phrase laden with an emotionality that shouldn't exist in such a small girl. James immediately recognized what he was hearing. Not just talent, but pure genius. When Emily finished the piece, silence lasted a few seconds before the square exploded in spontaneous applause. The girl rose from the piano and made a small curtsy, exactly as Daddy had taught her after every performance. James made his way through the crowd and knelt before Emily to be at her height. "What's your name, little one?" "Emily Thompson." The surname hit James like a punch. Thompson. David Thompson. The pianist who had died in that terrible accident 3 years ago? "Was your daddy called David?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she maintained control like a little soldier. "Yes, but Daddy's in heaven now. I play for him." James felt his heart break and mend at the same time. Before him stood the daughter of the greatest pianist of his generation, reduced to playing in the street to survive. But there was also something more precious than any diamond: pure talent that fate had placed in his path. James stood up and addressed Grandmother Rose, who had observed the entire scene with a mixture of hope and distrust. At 73, she had learned that strangers' promises often proved to be illusions, but there was something in this elegant man's eyes that convinced her of his sincerity. The golden business card James handed her confirmed her intuitions. It really was James Crawford, a legend in the British music industry, the man who had launched the careers of the country's greatest artists. "Your granddaughter isn't just talented," James said in a calm but determined voice. "She's a prodigy. A genius like one isn't born every generation." Grandmother Rose looked at Emily, who listened silently, her small hands still resting on the piano keys. For 3 years, she had watched this girl grow with extraordinary talent that she couldn't afford to cultivate. Every night, Emily fell asleep, moving her fingers on the sheets, as if playing on an invisible piano. James's proposal was clear and generous. Private lessons with Britain's best teachers, a recording studio at her disposal, age-appropriate concerts, and, of course, financial support for the family. But above all, the promise that Emily would always remain a normal little girl. "David was my friend," James confessed, seeing the hesitation in the lady's eyes. "We had many projects together before his death. I know what he would have wanted for his daughter." The father's name made Grandmother Rose's voice tremble. David had always believed that Emily was destined for something great, but tragedy had shattered all dreams. Emily approached and tugged at James's shirt with the seriousness of a little adult. "If I accept, can I help Granny? I don't like it when she cries because she can't pay the bills." The simplicity and generosity of these words broke James's heart. This 8-year-old girl cared more about her family than her own future. Grandmother Rose looked at her granddaughter, then at James, then back at Emily. In those blue eyes, she saw the same determination David had had when he decided at 8 to become a pianist. The agreement was sealed with a handshake, and the promise that music would always remain a pleasure, never an obligation. That evening, Emily played at Rule's Restaurant Chopin's Polonaise in A-flat major on a Steinway grand piano. The entire establishment stopped to listen, and when she finished, the applause lasted 5 minutes. But while everyone applauded, James noticed a man with a hat and dark glasses who was filming everything with his phone. The man disappeared quickly, but James felt a shiver of concern. In the music world, exceptional talents attracted not only admirers, but also unscrupulous people. James's mansion in Hampstead became the new home for Emily and Grandmother Rose. It was paradise for a little girl: a large garden, a swimming pool, and above all a music room with 3 different pianos. Emily explored everything with wide eyes, but when she saw the music room, she stood open-mouthed. Master Chen Wei, a small 65-year-old man with surgeon's hands and infinite patience, arrived in the afternoon. When he heard Emily play, tears ran down his face. In 40 years of teaching, he had never encountered similar talent. Training began immediately, but respecting the rhythms of a little girl. Emily studied 3 hours in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, with breaks for normal school homework and playing in the garden. James had also hired a private tutor so that Emily wouldn't lose her normal education. The first goal was the Young Talent competition at the Royal Opera House, which would take place in 6 months. An ambitious goal for anyone, but Emily wasn't an ordinary girl. During lessons with Master Chen, Emily showed supernatural learning ability. She memorized complex pieces in hours, and her interpretation had emotional maturity that seemed impossible at her age. "Remember, Emily," the master said during lessons, "technique is important, but soul is everything. You have the soul of 100 musicians." A week after training began, the video of the restaurant performance was posted online by the mysterious man. In hours, it went around the world and reached millions of views. Media from across the planet began talking about the Prodigy from London. James had to immediately organize a security system. Journalists camped outside the mansion, interview requests from around the world, multi-million-pound offers arriving daily. Emily, who didn't fully understand what was happening, continued studying and playing as if nothing had changed. "Am I famous?" she asked James one evening during family dinner. "You're special," he replied, "and when you're special, many people want to know you." Emily nodded with the wisdom of a girl who had already seen too much in life. The phenomenon grew daily. 3 weeks after the first video, Emily already had millions of fans worldwide. Children who began learning piano inspired by her, professional musicians who publicly recognized her genius, celebrities who wanted to meet her. But the offer that changed everything came a month later. The Royal Albert Hall wanted Emily for the opening concert of the 2024 season.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
She would become the youngest pianist in the history of Britain's most prestigious venue. The Royal Albert Hall offer unleashed an unprecedented media storm. Emily Thompson immediately became the most famous girl on the planet, with fan clubs on every continent and millions of followers on social media managed by James's team. The preparation months were intense but carefully balanced. James kept his promise to Grandmother Rose. Emily always remained a normal little girl. She studied in the morning, played in the afternoon, watched cartoons in the evening. But external pressure grew daily. Master Chen Wei pushed Emily towards the technical perfection the Royal Albert Hall demanded, but always with gentleness. The girl absorbed every lesson like a sponge and showed progress that seemed to defy the laws of human nature. Commercial offers multiplied, record contracts worth tens of millions of pounds, world tours, merchandising with Emily's face. James refused anything that could compromise Emily's childhood, but accepted educational projects like creating a series of teaching videos for children. The whole world awaited the London concert. Tickets sold in minutes, with prices reaching record heights. 3 prime ministers confirmed their attendance, along with the greatest living musicians. James organized everything with military precision. Private flight, presidential suite at the Savoy, discreet bodyguards, pediatric medical team. But above all, he ensured Grandmother Rose was always near Emily. In the final days before the concert, however, something began to change. Emily, who until then had handled everything naturally, began showing signs of stress. She slept poorly, ate little, and during rehearsals seemed more tense than usual. The day before the concert, during the dress rehearsal at the Royal Albert Hall, what everyone feared happened. Emily had a nervous breakdown. The pressure of cameras, photographers' flashes, the presence of thousands of journalists from around the world. Suddenly, everything had become too much for her. "I can't do it," she cried, in Grandmother Rose's arms in the dressing room. "I'm too little." James knelt beside her and took those small hands that had enchanted the world. "Emily, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You just have to do what you love. Play." Emily's crisis sowed panic throughout the organization. The most anticipated concert of the year threatened to be cancelled. The Royal Albert Hall producers were nervous, journalists impatient, audiences who had paid thousands of pounds for tickets awaited a decision. Emily had locked herself in the Savoy suite and refused to come out or speak to anyone except Grandmother Rose. The weight of the entire world on her small shoulders had proved unbearable. Grandmother Rose found the key to unlock the situation. That evening, while Emily still trembled with anxiety under the covers, the grandmother pulled an object from her luggage that she had never shown before, an old teddy bear, worn by time. "This is Daddy's teddy," she explained with a gentle voice. "He always took it to concerts. He said it gave him courage." Emily hugged the bear and stopped crying for the first time in hours. In that worn fabric, she could smell Daddy's scent, the warmth of memories when she was small and the world seemed a safe place. "If I take the teddy, will Daddy play with me?" "Daddy always plays with you, darling, in every note." The morning of the concert, Emily woke with a calm that surprised everyone. She had slept clutching Daddy's teddy and seemed to have found her serenity again. She had breakfast normally, laughed at James's jokes, and when it was time to prepare, she showed the same naturalness as the first days. The styling team had prepared a spectacular concert dress for her, but Emily chose a simple white dress that reminded her of what she wore for hours with Daddy. James understood this choice was perfect. The simplicity would make the contrast with the Royal Albert Hall's grandeur even more powerful. In the afternoon, during the final sound check, Emily went on stage at the Royal Albert Hall with the teddy in her hand. The venue was empty, but she knew that in hours it would fill with 5,000 people from around the world who had come to hear her play. She sat at the Steinway grand piano, placed the teddy on the music stand, as she had done 1,000 times at home with Daddy, and began to play. The notes of Chopin's Concerto No. 1 in E minor filled the empty hall with a purity that moved the technicians preparing the lighting to tears. "She's ready," whispered Master Chen Wei to James. "I've never seen such a small girl handle such pressure." On the evening of the concert, while Emily prepared in the dressing room with Grandmother Rose, James looked at the hall filling up. 5,000 people, including the world's greatest musicians, were about to experience something unrepeatable in music history. When it was time to go on stage, Emily took Grandmother Rose's hand. "Granny, whatever happens, I love you." "I love you too, darling. Now go and make the world dream." The Royal Albert Hall was an ocean of lights and expectations. 5,000 people held their breath, while Emily Thompson, 8 years old, walked to the grand piano that dominated the stage. In that simple white dress, with Daddy's teddy in her hand, she seemed even smaller in this majestic space. The silence was absolute when Emily sat at the piano. She placed the teddy with the care of one performing a sacred rite on the music stand, adjusted her hand position as Daddy had taught her, and closed her eyes for a moment. "Daddy," she whispered in a barely audible voice, "this is for you." The first notes of Chopin's Concerto No. 1 in E minor exploded from the Steinway like a cascade of liquid crystal. But what happened next exceeded all expectations. Emily wasn't simply performing a musical piece. She was telling the story of her life through the notes. Each musical phrase was loaded with emotions that an 8-year-old girl shouldn't know. Yet Emily possessed them all. The pain of losing Daddy, gratitude towards Grandmother Rose, hope for a better future. Everything transformed under her small fingers into pure music. In the audience, emotion was palpable. Great masters who hadn't wept for decades wiped their eyes. Music critics who had spent their lives dissecting every note remained silent, overwhelmed by the beauty of what they heard. James, sitting in the front row beside Grandmother Rose, felt his heart swell with pride and emotion. Beside him, the grandmother wept quietly, seeing in this girl on stage the fulfillment of all the dreams David had had for his daughter. When Emily reached the final movement, something magical and unexpected happened. The girl began to improvise, adding notes that weren't in Chopin's original score, creating a musical bridge that seemed to connect earth and heaven. It was as if Daddy was really playing with her, guiding her fingers to notes no composer had ever written. The concert lasted 45 minutes that seemed both an eternity and an instant. When Emily played the last note and rose from the piano, silence lasted 3 seconds that felt like 3 centuries. Then exploded the longest ovation in Royal Albert Hall history. 5,000 people stood and applauded for 15 minutes without interruption, in a tribute that went beyond recognizing talent. It was humanity's entire homage to a girl who had transformed pain into beauty. Emily, the teddy in her arms, made the curtsy Daddy had taught her and approached the microphone with the naturalness of a little star. "Thank you," she said in her crystal-clear voice that echoed in every corner of the hall. "This music is for my Daddy, who's in heaven, for my granny who loves me, and for all children who have a dream in their hearts." The ovation doubled in intensity, transforming into something beyond applause. It was the collective embrace of a world that had rediscovered hope through a girl's eyes. In the months that followed, Emily's concert became the most watched video in Internet history, exceeding 1 billion views. Her words, "For all children who have a dream in their hearts," became a global motto, printed on T-shirts, tattooed on skin, quoted by prime ministers and poets. But the most beautiful thing wasn't the multi-million-pound contracts that came from around the world, nor the covers of Time and Rolling Stone that proclaimed her the angel of music. The most beautiful was the birth of the David Thompson Foundation that James created to give free music lessons to poor children worldwide. At every subsequent concert, Emily insisted on always playing a free piece for children who couldn't afford tickets. Her music had opened doors that seemed forever closed, proving that true talent knows no social or economic barriers. 2 years after that magical concert at the Royal Albert Hall, Emily continued living with Grandmother Rose in James's mansion, continued going to normal school, continued playing with dolls and having tantrums like all girls her age. But she had also changed the world, one note at a time. "Do you know what my biggest dream is?" Emily said one evening to James, as they dined together in the mansion's garden. "What is it, little star?" "That all the children in the world can learn music, because music makes people happy, and the world needs more happiness." James looked at her with infinite tenderness. This extraordinary girl had not only conquered the world with her talent, she had kept her heart pure, and proved that true greatness is always born from love. And every night, before falling asleep, Emily placed Daddy's teddy on the bedside table and whispered to it, "Daddy, did I make our family proud?" From heaven, David Thompson smiled, knowing his daughter had done much more. She had given hope back to a world that had forgotten how to dream. Has this story touched your heart? Has it made you believe that children's dreams can truly change the world? If you too believe that talent has no age, that music can heal all wounds, and that behind every prodigy there's always a story of love and sacrifice, give it a like and share this video. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen a child with extraordinary talent? Do you believe we must protect and nurture the dreams of the youngest? Do you know stories of families who sacrificed everything for their children's future? Share your experiences and help us spread this message of hope to as many people as possible. Because every child deserves to see their dreams come true, and every talent deserves to be discovered and protected. Subscribe for more stories that celebrate the power of dreams and the courage of those who never stop believing. Like, comment, share, and subscribe for stories that prove age is just a number when it comes to changing the world.